And McCarthy makes his move, the House Speaker announcing the launch of an impeachment investigation against President Biden. McCarthy has been under pressure from the right flank of his party to do this. Some in the GOP accuse Biden of making money off of his son Hunter's business ventures during his time as vice president. But so far, there's been no concrete evidence to back up those claims. A Republican source, meanwhile, tells CNN that McCarthy isn't looking for a formal floor vote to get the ball rolling. Hint, it means he doesn't have the votes. But less than 2 weeks ago, he told Breitbart, quote, if we move forward with an impeachment inquiry, it would occur through a vote on the floor of the People's House and not through a declaration by one person. Whoops. McCarthy criticized then-Speaker Nancy Pelosi for pulling a similar move in 2019. CNN's Manu Raju caught up with McCarthy and asked about the reversal.
Nancy Pelosi has changed the rules. We're just following it. How are you, sir? Good to see you. Are you following through?
All right, let's bring in John Bresnahan, co-founder of Punchbowl News and someone who has basically seen it all on Capitol Hill over the years. Bres, thanks for being up early with us.
Good morning.
So let's talk through what we saw today. And I know you were up early talking about kind of the strategy moving forward here. Why did McCarthy do what he did in terms of this impeachment inquiry, and what's next?
Yeah, he was under tremendous pressure from his right, from a large chunk of the House Republican Conference to take some action against President Biden. And McCarthy personally believes, he really does, he's been talking about this for months, that he thinks the Biden family was involved in, improper behavior, that Joe Biden took official acts and was vice president that benefited his family, and that later on his Hunter Biden, the president's son, and James Biden, his brother, had these foreign business dealings and that the president profited from them. McCarthy does believe this. He believes this himself. So what he did was he opened up an impeachment inquiry. Now, there's a couple things. Will there be a House floor vote to formalize this? Maybe at some point. McCarthy has said it. Jim Jordan, the Judiciary Committee's chairman, said it. Others said it. Maybe. But right now, they don't have the votes to pass this. The second part is they'll be meeting behind closed doors this morning, House Republicans, this morning and tomorrow morning, to talk about this and to talk about other issues. How do they move forward on this, and what are they going to try and do?
That makes sense. It's just going to be an interesting meeting that I'm sure we're going to be learning about from you guys as you stand outside the door. I want to play a little bit of one senator's reaction, just because I certainly, it's a different way of doing things, and it shows you a little bit about how the Senate's changing, but also how Democrats are viewing this impeachment inquiry. This is Senator John Fetterman when he was asked about it yesterday. Watch.
Can we ask you about this news that Speaker McCarthy has formally launched an impeachment or has said he's going to?
Oh my God, really? Oh my gosh, it's devastating. Ooh, don't do it. Please don't do it. Oh no.
So is that just a reflection of how seriously Democrats are taking this?
The Democrats are just in the House. They're apoplectic. The House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries had a press conference yesterday with his leadership team. They're just really irate about this whole thing. I do think the Senate as a whole doesn't want to get involved in this. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell yesterday said, we got a lot of business to do. I don't want to tell the House what to do, but he's basically, that's his way of shutting it off. John Thune, the minority whip, was much more, he was outspoken about this. Like, they have a lot to do. There's government funding that has to be done. There's defense policy that has to be done. There's the farm bill. There's FAA reauthorization. You were talking about lines at airports before. I mean, this stuff has to be done, and they're going to end up probably voting on impeaching Biden in the House, and there's no chance the Senate will convict him or remove him from office. There's no chance, but we're going to spend months talking about this. So this is what their point is in the Senate. They're like, we have a government shutdown in a couple of weeks, and they're talking about impeaching Biden. The mismatch between what they think the American public wants and what the House is doing is pretty broad.
Right, and a shutdown stands to really impact a lot more Americans than this inquiry at this point. So, John, I want to switch gears and ask you about this Washington Post op-ed that was out this morning from David Ignatius, where he basically says the quiet part out loud. He's reflecting a lot of the conversations that, you tell me if you're having them, but I certainly have heard from a lot of Democrats that they're nervous about President Biden's age, what the poll numbers show, whether or not Senator Kamala Harris could carry the mantle if that, God forbid, became necessary. And he basically writes that. He says, quote, "I don't think Biden and Vice President Harris should run for re-election. It's painful to say that, given my admiration for much of what they have accomplished. But if he and Harris campaign together in 2024, I think Biden risks undoing his greatest achievement, which was stopping Trump." And again, I want to underscore for our viewers who David Ignatius is. Pretty sober-minded guy, very plugged in the West Wing, something the West Wing is going to be paying attention to. What's your read on this?
Yeah, members talk about it. I had a conversation with one Democrat yesterday who said this kind of along the same lines. Biden's 80. He's going to be he'll be 82 if he's sworn into another term. That is a concern. He's clearly, I've known Joe Biden since the 1990s. He's still sharp, but, it's 30 years,
He's a different guy. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody ages. So, look, I do think there's a tremendous, there's a lot of concern on two issues. One is the age issue. Every poll shows that Americans worry about it. Second, Biden's numbers in the economy still suck. They just do. I mean, the economy is pretty good, actually. His numbers are bad there. I think the two of those issues together combined with all, to really kind of hurt Biden. And the thing is that Biden's best foil, frankly, on the age issue is Trump, because Trump's only 4 years younger than him, But here's Ignatius is raising the point. They fear that, Biden running again, and he's still unpopular nationally. That opens the door for Trump. So I don't see what they could do. He's not going to leave,
Right.
on his own,
Right.
Or that's the only way he would leave. He's not going to be forced out. There's no way that's going to happen. If the Democrats did do that, then they'd have to turn to a governor, somebody, Gavin Newsom in California, Governor Pritzker in Illinois, somebody like that, Governor Whitmer in Michigan. Those Gretchen Whitmer, those would be people they'd look at. But right now, there's no talk about going to the bench on the Capitol Hill. They're all in on Biden for the moment.
Right. And they would only have a very brief window of time to do that even if they wanted to. John Bresnahan, thank you very much for being up early with us. Always great to see you, my friend.